Hello and welcome, friends. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you are new here, welcome. And if you're back, welcome back. I greatly appreciate all of the ongoing support. This is my channel, Dragon's Jewel Creative Gems, and I'm Tegan. And I'm just going to get all those wonderful YouTubey stuff out of the way. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please consider doing so. It's just down below. And if you like the content, please make sure you're hitting the like button on the videos. And of course, if you want to share some love down in the comments below, it's always greatly appreciated. And I absolutely love reading them. I do my best to make sure that I respond back and share some love in your direction as well, because naturally without you, this channel wouldn't exist. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I thought I would bring some of those Halloween spooky vibes to the channel. There are going to be in the WIP and Chat style format, but I'm going to read some ghost stories of Alberta, which is the province that I reside in. So I will have a spooky canvas that I'll be working on, and then I'm going to read a couple of ghost stories so that you can listen along while you dab and paint, or work on another craft, or what you normally do during WIP and Chats kind of thing, and I keep you company with some spooky tales from my province. So I figured that would be fun. Alberta's Legislature building. One of the few disappointments I suffered while researching and writing my earlier book on ghosts was not being able to confirm the oft-told story of the resident ghost in our stately old Legislature building. I'd heard from numerous people that the halls of the Ledge were heavily haunted, and even found a paragraph about the ghost in Frank Dolphin's book, The Alberta Legislature: A Celebration. In spite of chasing these hints, innuendos, and leads all over town through every source I could find, I was eventually forced to admit defeat. The story that I'd hoped would be one of the most intriguing in the book had apparently proven itself to be a non-story. Either my research was inadequate, or I'd been given misinformed leads. In the end, I accepted the word of the man who should know, Oscar Lacombe, then Alberta's Sergeant-at-Arms. Over coffee one pleasant spring afternoon, Mr. Lacombe patiently explained that he was behind all the ghostly rumors I'd heard about the Ledge, and he felt a strong personal obligation to clear the matter up for me, as he firmly believed he had inadvertently started the rumor in the first place. It seemed that when a newly hired security guard was about to work his first night shift in the stately government building, Lacombe decided to have a little fun at the rookie's expense. As he bid the man good night, he added that he hoped the guard wouldn't have a problem with the ghost. Oscar Lacombe believed that the simple line, meant only as a tweak of teasing, was responsible for the long-standing story about there being a ghost in Alberta's political headquarters. With that explanation, the story became, to me, the big one that got away. And that's the way I left the Haunted Ledge story until the fall of 1995, when I was doing an author visit at a bookstore in North Edmonton shopping mall. These promotional stints are fun because often, even if people aren't interested in buying books, they will stop and say hello. That's exactly how I received the story behind the rumors of the ghost at the Ledge. Sales had been gratifyingly steady during the afternoon by the time a man I judged to be in his mid-30s approached me. From his closely cropped hair, I assumed that he was either a member of the armed forces or a police officer. My assumption was close. He earned his living as a security guard at the Legislature building. When I met him, however, he was enjoying a family-style Saturday afternoon shopping excursion. We chatted rather aimlessly, it seemed at the time, while the people he was with browsed in the bookstore. It soon became apparent, however, that this man was not only interested in the phenomenon of ghosts, but also was quite knowledgeable about the paranormal field in general. "I can give you a generic palm reading," he commented casually. My response was anything but casual. I promptly thrust my hand in front of the man's face. He looked at it in silence for a moment. When he began to speak, he was amazingly accurate, detecting, among other things, a physical comfort I was suffering at the time that I'd not mentioned to anyone. Also, to my great embarrassment, he described with amazing accuracy a long-held secret. Perhaps feeling uncomfortable about having revealed knowledge about something so personal to a total stranger, the man revealed a confidence of his own. "There's a ghost at the Legislature building," he stated flatly. "Is there?" I asked with a hint of frustration in my voice. "Absolutely," he confirmed before asking, "Why does that surprise you?" I explained in detail the rumors I'd heard years before, and how despite my best efforts at interviewing those I thought would have inside information, the story had disappointingly fizzled. He immediately offered an explanation as to why the sergeant-at-arms would have a different view of the situation than he did. "Oscar Lacombe and his boys aren't in the building overnight," he replied. "It's not just the ledge either. There's something about the grounds in front of the building that's really spooky too. But neither of those are anything compared to the Hultillion building." This man, who had been a stranger just minutes before, was quickly becoming a valuable resource for me. "Tell me about it," I prompted. The man described how he and others working for the security company that is contracted to patrol the area frequently feel an unseen presence as they go about their rounds. You can't hear the footsteps, but occasionally you can actually see impressions, footprints, being made on the carpet in the hallways, either in front of or behind you, he explained, adding that knowing you're not alone, while not being able to see or hear the person you sense, can be an unnerving experience. When these guards are inside the building, they presume that unless there's another guard nearby, they are alone. Frequently, however, as they pass by one or more of the offices along the hallways, they can hear muffled sounds of conversations from within. Of course, it is their job to check out anything unusual, and they do. Mysteriously, however, when they unlock and open the door to the room the noises are coming from, the sounds stop, and they are staring into an empty room, or at least an area that appears empty. Public tours are offered regularly through the Legislature building. During these excursions, guides share many of the interesting oddities about the building. People are generally fascinated by the enormous portraits of King George V and Queen Mary that hang in the portrait gallery. The eyes in the paintings appear to follow you wherever you go. Watching other adults respond to this phenomenon with giggles of delight is as much fun as the feeling that you yourself are being watched by the inanimate canvas. Perhaps the all-time favorite stop on the tour, though, is the magic spot. On an upper floor, there is an area about 1 meter in circumference that possesses amazing auditory qualities. Standing in that location, you can clearly hear conversations being carried on in even far corners of the mammoth building. Guides explain that the architectural features of the building have created an acoustical pipeline to that one particular area. My new informant also had additional information about this oddity. The magic spot they show on the tours is only the one that stays in one place. There are lots of others around the ledge, but they're rarely in the same location twice. You never know, as you're walking along the corridors, when you're suddenly going to be listening to a conversation from 2 floors away, he explained. Remembering at the outset of his stories, this engaging man had included the grounds in front of the Legislature building and the Hatillion building immediately to the north of these grounds in the haunted category. I asked him to also tell me about them. The footsteps again, even when you're outside, you know there's someone walking right beside you. But nothing compares to being inside that Hatillion building. You never feel as though you're alone. There's always the sense that someone's with you and watching you, he said. At this critical point in our conversation, the man's family approached and indicated they were ready to leave the mall. I asked the man his name, and he gave me a very unusual answer, a monk here that I took to be a nickname. Therefore, not much help should I have tried to contact him again. Although that was disappointing, at least I finally had the ghost story that had eluded me the first time round. I may not know my information by his real name, but I think I know the ghost's identity. I suspect it's the unsatisfied spirit of Sir Frederick Hatillion that roams the halls of our government buildings. Hatillion was Premier of Northwest Territories at the turn of the century. In 1905, when Alberta and Saskatchewan became provinces in their own right, many people, Hatillion himself included, believed he should have been made Premier of one of the new provinces. Unfortunately, while Hatillion was a conservative, the federal government of the day was liberal, and so was not inclined to agree with that opinion. Hatillion went on to become opposition leader in the newly established province of Saskatchewan. When he was 49 years old, Frederick Hatillion married for the first time. Although the union officially lasted for 32 years, it could not have been a happy marriage. Hatillion dutifully supported his wife, the former Marion St. Clair Castellan, and her daughter from a previous marriage, even though the couple never shared a home, and only briefly during the marriage did they even live in the same continent. Given the political and personal frustrations during his life and the areas where the ghostly presence is felt, it's not hard to imagine that the spirit might be that of Frederick Hatillion. Perhaps he's still attending to unfinished business in and around the halls of Alberta's government. And so, years after beginning my research, I think I may have solved the mystery of the Alberta's Legislature's building's ghost story. Government House and the Provincial Archives. Government House now shares its grounds with the Provincial Museum and Archives, but when the sandstone residence was built in 1913, it stood alone, high on the north bank of the North Saskatchewan River. The imposing building was designed in part by Alan Jeffers, who also designed the Alberta Legislature building. For 25 years, the building served as an official residence of the province lieutenant governors. Since that time, the mansion has in turn been vacant, leased to an airline company and a veterans' home. Today, it is a venue for government conferences, meetings, and formal dinners. On January 1 each year, the public is invited to attend a reception at the Government House. The roots of this gala, known as the Lieutenant Governor's Levee, can be traced back an astounding 350 years. The gathering is a popular one. Albertans from all walks of life mingle with the government officials, high-ranking members of the military, and Mounties in their full-dress scarlet uniforms, as they enjoy light refreshments. By the time New Year's Day draws to a close, often nearly 1,000 people have been through the doors of the former residence. The levee usually rates a small article in the following morning's newspaper. A 91-year-old who had worked at the house when it was a veterans' home and had volunteered to help out at the levee in 1996 commented to the press that the building's ghosts were happy ones. On investigation, it would seem that the assessment would have to have been made by a woman because Archie, the ghost of the government house, is partial to the ladies. Employee Judy Wilson had some amazing stories to tell about the mansion's resident ghost. "We call him Archie for archives," she began.
He travels between here and the archives. Although the spirit makes his presence known equally to both men and women, the women who sense him rarely report feeling the discomfort that the men do. Some of the staff wonder if Archie's presence at the government house is connected with the former Premier William Eberhardt's government decision that such an official residence was undemocratic in the principle. While that was the official reason given, it's fairly clear from the perspective of hindsight that the closure of the house had considerably less to do with anyone's sense of democracy than it had with retaliation. The Premier was extremely angry with John Bowen, Lieutenant Governor at the time, for refusing to approve 3 bills that Alberta's social credit government wanted to have passed into law. No matter what the motivation on the legislature's part, Lieutenant Governor Bowen was suddenly and unceremoniously removed from the luxurious residence that he had, with great justification, presumed he would be able to call his home for his entire stay in office. For this reason, some of the staff today wonder if the ghost might be Bowen, turning to enjoy his stay at Government House into eternity. The caretakers can tell some amazing stories. One supervisor was terrified, Judy Wilson states. When Wilson explains Archie's habits, it's no wonder he gives people a start. She follows people, she elaborated. Regular staff are used to working with the sense of a presence accompanying them. Relief workers, however, are often unaware of the extraordinary stories involving Government House, and so are unprepared to deal with some of the strange sensations they can experience there. One relief caretaker who had been working upstairs suddenly rushed to the main floor looking distraught. He reported that someone was watching him work up there, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. After calming down, the man returned to his duties for a moment only. This time, when he rushed back downstairs, he stated flatly that he couldn't work up there. From the periphery of his vision, he thought he'd seen someone or something watching him from a corner of the room. That was clearly enough for him. Archie doesn't often allow himself to be seen, but on at least one occasion he was felt physically when he touched someone's leg. Whoever the spirit is seems to be pretty much carrying on with his own life and only intrudes on people's lives occasionally. Papers are heard being shuffled in empty rooms, and the elevators will every now and again travel up and down seemingly of their own accord. The staff has learned to accept these day-to-day activities, but even regular staff members are startled when chandeliers throughout the house begin to shake, or when they hear, but don't see, a hand being slammed down on a desk. Archie has even accompanied people outside Government House onto the grounds. This movement may be why the staff assumes the ghost in the archives is the same one that haunts Government House. The spirit in the back storage stacks at the archives has been seen only by security staff working the graveyard shift. They say he is dressed as though he might have been a clerk around the turn of the century, a reference archivist reported. If he is indeed the same spirit as the one that haunts Government House, in the newer building, Archie is apparently too involved with his nocturnal research to bother anyone. He just sits among the collections reading quietly and apparently contently. Next year, when the newspapers record the success of the New Year's Day levee, maybe they should increase the attendance figures by 1 in order to give Archie the attention and recognition he occasionally demands. The Fort Saskatchewan Jail. The fort, to anyone on either side of the law, anywhere in Western Canada, those 2 words meant only one thing: the jail at Fort Saskatchewan. The provincial government began building this foreboding-looking institute in 1913. Right from the beginning, its history was as unpleasant as it was colorful. Less than 2 years after the first sod was turned to begin construction, the jail hosted its first hanging. On October 6, 1915, 30-year-old George Leake was hanged from the neck until he was dead, the first in a long list of executions in the old jail. On November 22nd, 1922, Florence Losandro, the only woman ever to be hanged in Alberta, kept her gallows date with Arthur Ellis at the Fort Saskatchewan jail. This despite the fact she was likely innocent of indictable offense, guilty only of naivety. 22-year-old Robert Cook, convicted of the gruesome murders of his father, his stepmother, and 5 half-brothers and sisters, holds the distinction of being the last person ever hanged in Alberta. He dropped to his death at the end of a rope on June 26, 1959, while continuing to protest his innocence. Although the jail remained in use for many years after that, capital punishment had been outlawed, and so the gallows area of the jail was the one of the first to be abandoned. Of course, not everyone who died at the jail was executed. Over the years, several prisoners died from natural causes while serving time. Often these men had lost touch with any family they may have had, and no one claimed their bodies. To offer the deceased some of the dignity in death that they missed in life, a section of the prison grounds was turned into a graveyard, and inmates assigned to the metal shop made simple crosses as grave markers. Today the jail has been demolished, but the cemetery remains. The area around the impersonal graves is virtually alive with the spirits of those wasted lives. Their presence can be felt by even the least sensitive visitor. Before its demolition, the old jail stood empty for 5 years, while controversy raged around it. One side of the argument held that the cavernous place should be destroyed to make room for more commercially viable buildings. A second, equally motivated and vocal group wanted the prison preserved in some form or another. This later congregation held a number of disparate ideas about what form the old jail's future should take. While this lack of agreement made for stimulating discussions, it also served to splinter the preservationists' campaign, and so, on August 16th, 1994, the wreckers moved in. Within a week, the eerily empty old place had been reduced to a pile of rubble. Shirley McLeod, an energetic young wife and mother living in Fort Saskatchewan at the time of the controversy, stood staunchly in the Preserve the Jail camp. She believed that the old place could continue to serve the community and even all of Canada if it were turned into a museum reflecting the country's history of law enforcement. She and others worked long and hard, and as it turned out, unsuccessfully, to protect the jail from destruction. Less than a year before it was torn down, Shirley, her husband Kent, and their daughter Elizabeth joined a half-dozen other interested people on a tour of the deserted penitentiary. Former guard Al offered to serve as a guide during the excursion. The tour was a thorough one, including even areas that the public would not normally want to see. We walked through the kitchen and then on to the room where the prisoners about to be hanged were kept, Shirley recalled. He showed us the room where death row inmates were kept. It had one small window that only allowed a prisoner to see outside where the gallows were being built for him. On our way, Al pointed out the stairway leading to the gallows outside. A space beside the gallows staircase was partially lit from lights we had turned on along our way. An ordinary kitchen chair sat in the corner. Liz and I noticed a person huddled on the floor in the corner behind the chair. Then just as quickly as it had appeared, the image disappeared. Swinging around to her daughter, Shirley exclaimed, "Did you see that?" The youngster was so unnerved by the sight that she could only respond with a monosyllabic, "Yeah." I asked her what she saw to make sure we were talking about the same thing. She said there was a guy in the corner, but he disappeared. Shirley reported the sighting to the guard tour leader, who wasn't surprised at all and added whatever he walked through the place, he got an eerie feeling and fully expected to be confronted by a ghost. Because the jail itself is no longer there, none of us will ever know whether or not we might have had a chance to see the ghost of the frightened man for ourselves. But a trip to Fort Saskatchewan Jail Cemetery should trigger even the most skeptical cynic's goosebump reflex. As you approach the tiny fenced-in graveyard, the first thing you will notice is the silence. If you've been chatting with a companion while walking toward the cemetery, your conversation will doubtless wind down as you come within sight of the anonymous plots. If there is any sound at all, it'll only be the murmuring of the breeze in the prairie grasses, which somehow adds to the totality of the silence. While you may be suspicious that your sense of hearing is not functioning at all, another sense, once you're not nearly as familiar with, will be working overtime. The hairs on the back of your neck will stand up, and you will experience a couple of involuntary shivers or shudders that'll leave your arms decorated with goosebumps. It's a strange sensation, and it's stranger still that this reaction is so predictable in that particular spot. Perhaps this is the feeling that one human soul gets when it becomes aware of another human soul. Perhaps this is the essence of a ghost story. Haunted banks. Many people dread going to work each day, but a few dedicated souls are so attached to their jobs that they continue to report for work even long after they have died. It's a fair bet that the two following stories are examples of this phenomenon. Everyone in St. Albert knows that, despite the local Bank of Montreal's building name, no one processes financial transactions there. Nevertheless, the stately 75-year-old Georgian-style building is still always referred to that way, even though it hasn't housed the Bank of Montreal or any other bank since 1989. It didn't even begin life as a Bank of Montreal. The building's past is intriguing. Centrally located in downtown St. Albert, it was constructed in 1921 as the Banque de Hochelaga. The contractor must either have been a budget-conscious person or a forerunner of today's recyclers, because he used bricks reclaimed from the failed Royal Hotel. This created the interesting circumstance of the building's materials being considerably older than the actual building. It could also be a contributing factor to its status today as a haunted building. The Banque de la Hochelaga did not survive the Depression, and it closed its doors for good in 1936. Soon after, the building was reborn as a coffee shop, the Rainbow Inn. In its next incarnation, it housed multiple offices in 1955. However, the Bank of Montreal bought the building, and it became a place of finance once again. In 1989, the Bank of Montreal branch moved on to more up-to-date surroundings, and the building that had been a landmark in the town for so long was declared a historic site. It sat empty for a while before local businesses began to see the appeal of situating themselves in this centrally located and historically significant building. John and Denise Calduff, owners of Clayworks, were tenants there for several years. There's little question in either of their minds that the old place is haunted. We have both heard footsteps from up on the second floor, John explained. The noises came as something of a surprise to the couple. We didn't hear anything the first year, but once the upstairs tenants moved out, it got quieter. On several occasions when the second floor was empty, we heard noises coming from there, because it sounded as though someone were walking around up there. The call drifts would investigate the sounds, but they always found the same thing, an empty second story, or as John put it, there was no human form. The upstairs would originally have been used as the bank manager's living quarters. Perhaps one of the former employees has stayed on to enjoy his former home into eternity. The Calduffs have since moved their business, but judging from the matter-of-fact way they speak of the time they spent in the haunted building, the phantom footsteps overheard weren't a factor in their decision to relocate. The Calduffs ghost story bears a remarkable resemblance to the one told to me in Lethbridge. Elisa Rasmussen hosts a daily television show on CFCN in the southern Alberta city. The fact that it has been running for more than 20 years attests to Elisa's skills as a hostess and the show's popularity. Knowing of my renewed search for the ghost stories, this warm and personable lady invited me to once again be a guest on her program. We'll open the phone lines. People can call and tell you their ghost stories, she offered enthusiastically. It'll be great fun. Sadly, our best laid plans went badly awry, leaving CFCN's camera and audio crews wondering if their station was haunted. The phone lines, which had been tested and found to be working well the night before, simply refused to cooperate once they were on air. Only one call made its way through to us. The caller was the wife of a bank manager. In the course of her husband's career, the pair had moved all over our province. In one town, they lived in an apartment above the bank. In the morning, we would hear the sounds of metal coat hangers banging together as if someone was going through her bedroom closet, she told us. At first, this noise made the caller and her husband very uncomfortable. After all, jangling coat hangers make a pretty distinctive sound. Not one you could easily write off as building noises. The woman and her husband were nowhere near the closet when they heard the sounds, and they were certainly the only people in their bedroom. We got used to it, though, she added. I always thought it was just some poor dead bank manager looking for something to wear again this morning. If today's banks are looking for long-term relationships with their managers, they may do well to read the personal manuals from years ago. After all, at least a couple managers from that earlier time seem to have positively defined the phrase loyal employee. Grace Hospital. The story came to me in a rather unusual way while attending a dinner meeting at the Alberta Historical Society. A friend and I shared a table with a couple we've chatted with on other occasions and a young man who I'd never met before. As we enjoyed the meal and one another's company, we exchanged information about what we did for a living. When I identified myself as the author of Ghost Stories of Alberta, the young man, John Dolphin, said that he and a friend had been collecting ghost stories in 1991. He indicated that he might still be able to turn up the stories and leads they collected if I would be at all interested in looking at them. This offer seemed too good to be true, and I tried very hard not to get my hopes up. A few days after we'd been chatting, however, a bulky envelope arrived in my mailbox. The following intriguing tale was nestled in the cache. As I don't know who recorded the story, I have no way of knowing the writer's gender. I have completely arbitrarily inserted feminine pronouns. The writer indicated that from 1982 to 1985, she worked at Grace Hospital. While allowing that such a building is bound to be full of unexplained noises, she was still convinced that at least one area of the hospital was haunted. After reading her report, you might be convinced too. The haunted room is a delivery room in the maternity ward. It had been known for years that a woman in labor placed in that particular room would have a long and difficult delivery, often ending in a cesarean section. The nurses avoided placing patients in that room unless the hospital's senses of the day dictated otherwise, the former employee explained. The reputation of that one delivery room was so well accepted by hospital staff that when a patient in another ward declared himself to be a psychic, he was invited to spend some time in the delivery room in question and report his findings to the staff. The psychic who read the room came out with this story. There was a ghost residing in that room. Her name was Maudine, and she had died in childbirth many years ago. She feared that if she allowed a woman to give birth in that room, they would die as she had. Some of us believed this story, some of us didn't, the writer advised. While avoiding any explanation as to in which camp she belonged. Many years later, the writer of this account was helping a young family to prepare to leave the hospital when their newborn infant. Just then, the Old Grace Hospital heating pipes began making a terrible racket. To the family, she quipped, "Oh, that's just our resident ghost, Maudine." The new father looked at her in amazement. "Maudine?" he asked. "Maudine Riley?" Now it was the hospital's employee's turn to be amazed. She had never thought of a ghost as ever having had a last name. She listened intently as explained that he was a direct descendant of the Riley family who had originally owned the land on which the hospital was built. The land adjacent to the hospital is still called Riley Park. The hospital is built on the site of the original Riley homestead, he told her. Our informant must have been an amateur investigator because she turned up a photograph of the 2-story home long before it was demolished. The first floor consisted of kitchen and living space, the second floor of the bedrooms and maid quarters. Maudine Riley had lived in the house and died in childbirth in a second-floor bedroom many years ago. In viewing the photo, it became evident that the room where Maudine had died was almost in the exact same location where she now resided as a ghost, the informant detailed. The Riley descendant told her that there had been a monument erected to the memory of Maudine and her baby at the Catholic church across the street from the hospital. I drove by the church that afternoon and saw the monument, like a grave marker, but was too afraid to get out of my car to see it. From that day on, the ghost of Maudine was no joke to me, and as far as I know, to this day, the delivery room nurses avoid putting laboring women in the room at the end of the hall, she concluded. Canmore's Apparition. Despite my having better than average connections in the town of Canmore, the story eluded me for years. No one, it seemed, was comfortable talking about their experiences, even to trusted workmates, who would have then relayed the story to me. I'd pretty well given up any hope of ever hearing the whole story, when a fellow folklore buff sent me a copy of a write-up and an archival copy of the Calgary Herald. The thought-provoking story it contained was certainly worth the wait. The events take place at the Canmore Community Centre, a complex that houses the town's arena and dance hall. Rink attendant Kevin Stevenson told the paper, "I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a ghost, and I really don't want to find out." Kevin first saw the apparition in November of 1983. For fear of being teased, he kept the experience to himself until he heard his co-workers discussing similar experiences. I was on the tractor driving around doing my last flood. I got this real spine-tingling chill. It felt like something was staring at you. I looked all over and didn't see anything. I looked up in the windows and saw the silhouette, Kevin said. My eyes just started pouring water. I was just so scared. Kevin described the apparition as being small with long hair. He mentally dubbed the image Little Hippie. Some years later, as he worked in the ice plant, Kevin heard footsteps on the boardwalk outside the door. He looked all around the community center, but the area appeared to be deserted, and so he returned to his duties. The sounds of the footsteps, however, continued. Tom Bison confirmed some of Kevin's information. He had looked up at the window where the other man had seen the unidentifiable image. Tom described seeing a wisp of a figure staring at him. Tom and Kevin even shared a couple of eerie experiences in the arena. One night, they were working together when they distinctively heard a child call for its mother. Despite a thorough search of the complex they both knew well, they turned up nothing. They have also heard the unnerving sound of a dog growling, although there was no animal anywhere on the premises. Tom summed up his feelings about the experiences this way. "We were all kind of leery to talk about it at first, because we thought people would think we were crazy. But when it happens so often and so many have seen it, you just can't deny it. Employees of a construction firm hired to do some work at the arena reported seeing what they presumed was a ghost, and others have heard unexplainable noises coming from the second floor. Apparently, you don't have to be working at the community center to see the apparition. The girlfriend of the maintenance staff supervisor was not at all surprised to hear the stories told by the staff. She'd seen the ghost too, but like the others were at first, she was hesitant to speak of her encounter. Speculation has it that a little girl drowned in the swamp that once existed where the complex is now located. It is said that her body was never recovered, and many feel certain that hers is the spirit haunting the Canmore Community Center. They might be right. Sister's spirit nurses on at St. Michael's Hospital. Lethbridge in southern Alberta is a particularly attractive city. Its location along the spectacular Old Man River Valley is complemented by charming historic buildings mixed with striking modern architecture. Many of these attractive buildings, both old and new, are haunted. The most comforting and friendly of the Lethbridge ghosts is a nun who haunts St. Michael's Health Center. Nurses have reported on several occasions that while they've been on their evening rounds, patients have asked if the kindly nun who sat with them all through the previous night would be returning. This nun appears in a white habit and sits near the patients to offer them comfort while they are ill. No one has ever been able to identify the ghost. They've simply named her Sister. Over the years, only one patient ever complained of being frightened by seeing the ghost's ghostly presence. Any nurses who were initially spooked soon realized she was a good ghost, not a harmful one. Elda Barva, a longtime administrator at the center, recalls hearing about many instances when the apparition entered patients' rooms and was seen either by them or by nurses. A nurse who also worked at St. Michael's for a number of years and who asked to remain anonymous has encountered Sister on many occasions. One particular time I was working in the ICU, intensive care unit. There was a little hall and a phone in the hall, and we had a back room where we kept the IV bags. Sister dropped one of the IV bags in front of the phone in the hallway. I put it back and she did it again, the nurse explained. After tidying up from this seemingly nonsensical prank, several times the nurse noticed that although there were dozens of intravenous bags in the room, only one was continually being sent in front of the phone. Apparently the long-deceased sister's spirits wanted the bag thrown away. The expiration date marked on the bag had passed. This particular trick of Sister's became an accepted warning to the staff at St. Michael's. The ghost would take an IV bag from the room where it had been stored if it was outdated or if the hospital's supply of intravenous bags was running low. On another occasion, staff arrived at the hospital in the morning to find a fire hose draining into a bathtub. Upon thorough investigation, there was no explanation as to who could have placed the hose in the tub, but the faucet the hose was attached to was found to be leaking, so although there were puddles to be mopped up, the damage was considerably less severe than it could have been, only because an unseen presence moved the running hose from the hallway floor into the tub. The ghost also warned the staff if patients needed help by moving curtains, dropping items, or giving some other sign. We always paid attention, recalled the retired nurse. She added that on many occasions they would hear the elevator going up and down when there was no one in it. We knew Sister was doing her rounds, she affirmed. She's taken temperatures, changed beds. She's a good ghost. No one seems to know for sure whose spirits the ghost may be, and it doesn't matter much. What is evidence is that the kindly woman's devotion to the sick and injured survived beyond her own death. Ghost in Calgary's Old City Hall. Given our system of democratic rule, it is a given that anywhere legislation is inactive will become an arena for controversy. Controversy began swirling around Calgary's old City Hall even before the sod was turned for its construction. And controversy continues today, years after the building has been replaced by an immersive new facility. The debate before and during construction of the stately old sandstone structure centered around what were viewed as unnecessary delays in completing the building. It was under construction for 4 years, and a horrendous increase in the expenses involved. The final cost was twice what had been estimated. Today the controversy is centered around the grand old building's ghosts. Are they really there? How many are there? Who were they, and why do their spirits remain? Information Officer Don Morberg had heard rumors that 2 ghosts had been seen in the building, one a man, the other a woman. The man may be a former prisoner who died years ago in the police lockup, he reports. The identity of the female apparition is a little more difficult to pin down. She's seen on the old stairs, Morberg recounts. We have no record of any female dying in the building. I've heard that she might be a former alderman's wife, or perhaps a madame who had been locked up in the basement cells at one time. Most of the sightings had been by the building's security personnel, and unfortunately, they aren't talking. They know something, that's for sure, attests a contract employee who had asked not to be named, but then went on to tell the story of a woman who fled an office, packing an enormous amount of heavy gear with her. The woman had been trying to do her job while ignoring the sensation of not being alone in a room where she presumed she was alone. Finally, the uncomfortable feeling overpowered her work ethic, and she left announcing, "I'm not working in there tonight." At this writing, the old City Hall, ghosts and all, is temporarily out of service. The building closed late in 1995 in order to undergo restoration and reconstruction. Hauntings are often disturbed during renovations, so the building's reopening in the spring of 1997 will be an interesting time both for Calgarians and for ghost hunters everywhere.